is the Decision Point with Anand Nanduri. Anand, it's time. It's time to get back together and get a status update on the NFL. Which NFL teams are exceeding expectations? Which NFL teams are missing expectations or just outright face planning through 5 weeks? There's a few teams that we talked about that are not excelling the way we thought. There are a few teams that we thought would be in the running for Caleb Williams, and they're definitely not. They're way better than we thought. So let's first talk about the teams that need to start focusing on the 2024 draft. I know it's sad, right? I know there's some fan bases out there that are not happy with what they've seen through 5 weeks, but the beauty is now you can start cheering for your team to lose. My daughter and I had this conversation this week. It's why we're having this show. This episode in particular was conceived when I was talking to my daughter saying, hey, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about the Patriots? Like, well, how do you feel? Like, what do you want out of this team? How are you approaching every week now as a fan? And because she's spent her whole life around the Podfather, she came right back with, well, I just hope they lose every game so we can get the best draft pick possible. And I was like, bam! That's my daughter! That's right! That's exactly right! She's already figured it out! She's figured it out, man. That's what being a sports fan's all about. It's about figuring out you know when to hold them in terms of know when to hold out hope and know when to fold them, baby. So the Patriots fan, the 12-year-old Patriots fans are already folding. That's where we're at. And I know there's a bunch of other teams where they need to come to that realization as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a few. Everybody watched Denver last night. That's an operation. You know, Nathaniel Hackett tried to save it. Sean Payton's tried to save it. It's time, guys. There's there's so much wrong with that team. You can talk about the Giants. You can talk about Carolina, the Jets. Obviously, you know, there are plenty of teams that, you know, we had hopes for, at least salvageable hopes. You can be a middle of the road team, and they're just not getting it done. So, I mean, I think of all of them, New England's probably the most interesting to talk about because you have a Hall of Fame coach, and you know, you have an organization that you've seen with a lot of the same pieces win before, and the reboot is absolutely not working.
No. Denver has the second worst win percentage in the NFL, behind only Carolina, who has not won a game. And the only reason that Denver has that win percentage is because they had the extra game, the extra loss, right? They're 1-5, where the other teams with a similar losing percentage, if you want to say it that way, are 1-4. So the worst teams in the league right now by point differential are, well, Carolina first and foremost, right? So Carolina, their point differential is, well, not the worst actually. The worst team by point differential, do you know who it is?
I think it's the Giants.
It is the Giants by a lot.
Yeah.
Right, but I was going to say it's got to be Carolina. It's not. Right? So the Giants have a minus 91 point differential. And who are they starting this week?
I believe they're starting Tyrod Taylor.
Okay, so all those fans, all those Giants fans, they're in tank mode. They already know. Ideally after week 1, right? Giants fans are like, all right, we're tanking. Okay, we're good. Yeah. Please tank. So Carolina minus 53 with their point differential. Washington, even though they're 2-3, actually have a pathetic point differential, minus 51. Denver, as we talked about, is minus 71. Okay, but yeah, the team that I want to talk about right now, the Patriots, minus 76.
Yuck.
Yeah, minus 7. So it's really that by point differential, they are technically the second worst team in the NFL and the worst team in the AFC. We talked about this. You said, who do you trust to make plays on offense or defense? That was the question this offseason. Who do they have? Right? And they're like, well, they have Belichick. When you ask who's the best player on the team, and the analysis comes back, the coach, and the coach happens to be the oldest coach in the league, then all I can say is, well, you're fucked. Yeah, they're all the way fucked. But the nice thing is they're on track. They're on track to have one of the top 5 draft picks.
The concern is it's not. You're never going to replace Brady and Belichick. But what they're really struggling to replace is Dante Scarnecchia, because their O-lineman that they've drafted, that he turned over and over and over again, late round pick, into star free agents that they didn't re-sign because they had drafted and developed another one. Those guys aren't coming down the road anymore. And it's obvious that as a strength of their team, when you look at, the rushing production that they've gotten out of Ramondre Stevenson in the past and Damian Harris in the past, the stuff that's just not there, it's not just a one-sided problem. It's not just, we'll fire Matt Patricia and everything will be solved. The issues that New England has are layers deep. And, for a long time, Belichick was able to coach them around that. They were able to develop offensive linemen around that. But now you're looking at basically what a full teardown rebuild looks like. And the really sad part is, do we have any idea how good Mac Jones is? No. And the thing is, the really sad part about what we've seen out of Mac Jones so far is there was promise. Rookie season, there was hope. There was a lot of stuff to like. And he's, once again, like we saw, we've seen it with other quarterbacks before. If you take away the pieces around them that made them successful to begin with, namely O-linemen that he could trust, there's no trust in the offense anymore. He's out there playing like he looks exactly like what a talented player that does not have anything around him looks like. They're lost. They're disparate. Christian Gonzalez is now on IR, which sucks because he was a really fun player. We loved him. I mean, what is there to get excited about besides potentially having a top 7-8 draft pick?
Nothing. I asked my daughter this. Who are you excited about? Who's the big playmaker, right? Who are the exciting electric wide receivers that you can't wait for Mac Jones to deliver the ball to, right? And you're right. I think that there's a talent deficit across this team, unit by unit. They're below average. Right? This is what we talked about this summer. Unit by unit, you go to the Patriots, unit by unit, you're challenged to find a superstar anywhere and an above average unit anywhere on the roster across the squad. And they're missing the Joe Thuneys, right? Joe Thuney, 2016, drafted round 3, pick 78. That's what you're talking about, right? You're talking about players like Joe Thuney, who are now 30 years old, playing for the Chiefs, playing for a championship, came through the Patriots system where they would find the guard in the 3rd round and turn that guy into a Pro Bowler, and he would eventually either win a Super Bowl with Brady or win a Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. There's not enough Joe Thuneys coming down the pipeline.
And it goes to show you, rebuilding a team requires stacking several drafts on top of each other, because not all of your draft picks are going to hit. And it's why we advocate all the time for trading back, because if you establish yourself as having a decently high hit percentage on draft picks, the only thing that you need is more of them. So long term, if you're New England, yeah, of course, if you have, the draft capital to secure a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, which, gosh, who knows, where those two end up. That's going to be a big part of this puzzle. But if you don't get one of those two, do you trade back? Do you look at a Joe Alt at Notre Dame at tackle and say, okay, well, since we can't draft and develop them like we used to, we're just going to take, one of the pro-ready ones in Fashanu or Alt out of Notre Dame and Penn State, respectively? Do we need to overpay for superstar receiver, because that's historically been something that we struggle with drafting? Do we go get a Marvin Harrison Jr.? Can Brock Bowers be what he is at the next level, like he looks at Georgia right now? Do we need an Emeka Egbuka if we fall further down in round one? Roma Dunze. There are all kinds of really talented players in round one this year that solve issues that historically New England has had drafting, that it almost makes sense for them, if they're not in that top 2 pick discussion, to just immediately trade back for somebody that is ready, in the teens, to give up multiple things and start drafting some of the positions that they desperately need to even see what they have in Mac Jones. Because right now you're looking at a quarterback that looks completely lost, and I don't think that you can sit there and say it's entirely on him.
No, they did, though. They did get a superstar in Christian Gonzalez. I think Christian Gonzalez has what it takes to become a superstar in the league. Incredible pick. But it's the next coaching staff that's going to be able to enjoy Christian Gonzalez. There was a time when New England, not only were they drafting the Joe Thuneys in the 3rd round, before that, they were signing Randy Moss. They knew that they needed to acquire superstars to get to the next level. You couldn't just do it with Brady, even though Brady did do it with like Deion Branch and Troy Brown at one point. They're like, no, we'll go a step further, right? And also, remember the clever trades they would do? Trade a 7th rounder for Wes Welker. They're not doing that anymore. Like their front office is not as active, making these big splashy trades, but also making these smaller moves, these super tactical value trades. They would shift 6th and 7th rounders all the time. Like they were the most active team in the offseason, trading these picks during the draft, trading picks, right? Moving up and down, but always netting extra late round picks, then using those late round picks later to acquire a Wes Welker. This is what they did. And it's not a surprise that you look up and their coach, who is also doubles as their general manager, their de facto general manager, he's in his 70s. You can't expect him to have that kind of energy level and to churn through all of the possible iterations of ways that they can upgrade the roster throughout the offseason. He's just not that guy anymore. He's 70 years old. It's not possible for a 70-year-old to grind at the level that would be required for this team to get their roster upgraded to the point that it was in 2009.
And the thing is, Belichick, the coach, and Brady, the quarterback, saved themselves a lot from Belichick, the GM. And the problem is now it's on Belichick, the GM, to save Belichick, the coach, and his young quarterback in Mac Jones. And that operation is just not working. It became clear that Belichick, the coach, and Brady, the quarterback, could save Bill, the GM. I don't think that's true anymore. The Bill, the GM, can't save this team because right now they look like a shell of the dynasty that they were. And look, it's not. This is how quickly things change. That dynasty ended 3 years ago. It's not like that happened in the 90s. We're 3 years removed from New England really competing for Super Bowls.
It's
this
football,
is how
man. It's football. A player that was good 3 years ago, there's no guarantee he's going to be good in 3 years. This is what happens. Yeah. Right? These teams have a shelf life of a couple of years. Yeah. And then it's over, man. It's over. It might be you go from winning a championship, Los Angeles Rams, and you're better off tearing it down. I don't think that the Rams are going to tear it down or even should tear it down because they just got Cooper Kupp back. We need to continue to evaluate that team. They've played better, right? Their defense has been better. Their offensive line certainly has been a lot better than expected this year. So I want to see what the Rams are with Cooper Kupp before I say, hey, this is a team that really should be looking to tank. We know Denver needs to be tanking. So these older coaches with Super Bowls on their resume are not long for the NFL. That's Belichick, right? Do you think he lasts the season?
I think he'll get through the season, and I think that, basically they'll take total eval of what assets they have and kind of what they're going to do looking forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's not there in 2024.
I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make it to the end of the season. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees. Now, Denver, I think because they traded a first-round pick for Sean Payton, that's the guarantee that Sean Payton is not going to be Nathaniel Hatcheted. Yeah. So he stays. Now, what about New York? So New York, there's been all these injuries, Saquon Barkley, the offensive line, Andrew Thomas, like so many key players getting injured. Even Darren Waller's been playing through a groin injury. So that coach came in with a lot of hype. He fixed Daniel Jones. He fixed Daniel Jones. He coached
smoke and mirrors.
Right? Right? It was you coach Josh Allen, and Josh Allen evolves into a completely different quarterback than he was at Wyoming or even in his first year in the league, and you get the credit. And now, by point differential, you're the worst team in the league. Does that narrative that he's the great quarterback fixer, does that save the Giants front office, the Giants coaching staff?
I think so, but there is a, 1-to-1 here that looks like it's becoming a lot clearer, and it's Matt Nagy leaving Kansas City, transform. Mahomes was not this in college, so he got a lot of the credit there. Went to the Bears, had Mitchell Trubisky looking good with a lot of the same smoke and mirrors. That fell apart cataclysmically, not even because of the quarterback contract, just because Mitch wasn't that guy. And you're worried now, if you're a Giants fan, is this the rinse repeat? I think Daboll's a better coach than Matt Nagy is. And I do have, faith that him and Kafka can do some things there. The problem is
we have no idea if Brian Daboll is the reason for anything that Josh Allen delivered or that the Bills delivered in the years he was there.
That's definitely fair.
Okay?
That's
and then he
fair,
comes to and the fantasy analysts and sports broadcasters are leading every bit of a player analysis with the help of Brian Daboll or the Brian Daboll offense. And it's like, sure, for now, those labels work when a team is performing. And as soon as the team is bottom of the league in point differential, it ceases becoming the Brian Daboll offense. I'm not hearing that much anymore. I'm not hearing as much the Brian Daboll offense. I'm hearing a lot about the problems with the players. And this has been one of my perpetual frustrations with sports in general, is that when the team is outperforming expectations, the coach gets all the credit. He is the coach of the year in many cases. That's what drives coach of the year. It's not the winningest coach. It's the coach that exceeded expectations the most. And then they affix this prefix to every player's performance that it's in the context of the Brian Daboll system, or the Brian Daboll this, Brian Daboll that. And I know that everyone's like, well, that's true, except if it's a Shanahan or someone that came from a Shanahan system. So yes, I Brian Daboll, that's true. Like, we were tricked by Brian Daboll, just like we were tricked by Matt Nagy, and we can go all the way back to all the people we've been tricked by. There's a guy named Trestman, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? That was my favorite. My favorite was that my original rant on this was how fantasy gamers, the experts in quotes, steamed up Justin Forsett, who was 195 pounds. They steamed up Justin Forsett. This was the first time I knew. This was my window through the looking glass, right? This was my stepping through the looking glass moment. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Okay, you're going to draft this running back in the third round? And there's nothing on his profile. I have PlayerProfiler.com, right? He's not an exceptional athlete. Yeah, he's a nice receiver. He's a satellite back. You what? You're going to draft him in the third round? Are you mad? Are you insane? Third, fourth round for Justin Forsett? And the first bullet point in the argument is always Trestman. Don't forget about Trestman, right? And I'm like, Trestman, right? And they're like, well, Trestman fixed, somebody. I don't remember. I think Trestman might have fixed Jay Cutler. So I don't remember, right? No. Adam Gase. That was Adam Gase. Remember the Adam Gase offense? I don't know if Adam Gase. Adam Gase was gonna fix the Dolphins, right?
Poor
Because
Jets
because Adam Gase was the coach tied to Peyton Manning. Right. And so if you helped Peyton Manning in some way, if you held a clipboard, if you were the one running the projector for Peyton Manning in the meetings, then that means that you clearly all that wisdom from Peyton Manning, where Peyton Manning's just one of the more underrated athletes of all time. Peyton Manning was an exceptional athlete. Right. Yes, he was good at processing information. Right. Yes, he was a hard worker. The work ethic was there, but he was also a great athlete. When you compare Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, there's no comparison. Tom Brady was not an exceptional football quarterback, athletic prototype. Coming out of college, coming out of high school, like you can hear him talk all about it. He'll go on for 30 minutes about how at every step of the way, even though he would win, the very next season they would send him right back to the backup role. Oh, nope, sorry, we got this Henson kid now. So no, you're back. I know you thought you should have beat out Greasy. Nope, now it's Henson. Every year be a new guy, right? Because he was not that level of athlete. Peyton Manning was.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah, Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning was a golden boy recruit and was definitely going to be the starting quarterback like on day one.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
no question.
he also just happened to have the work ethic to go along with it, so then there was no question. No one was ever going to beat him out. At no point was Peyton Manning ever beat out for the starting job, ever. Right? But there were coaches along the way that got head coaching jobs just because they were operating in the wake of Peyton Manning. And this goes way back, way back. I don't even remember. Do you remember Trestman's first name?
Mark
Trestman. That's right. It was Mark. I did not remember his first name. He was so forgettable as a coach. Mark Trestman, I believe he fixed Jay Cutler. Will let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments. Is that correct? I don't remember exactly. But there's a long history of this. And so when I remind everyone that Mike McDaniel is operating in a world where he has the best receivers, maybe the best receiving duo the league has seen in at least 5 years, right? Because Jalen Waddle would be Tyreek Hill on another team, right? He was, just look at the efficiency metrics, look at the air yards, the air yard share, the yards per reception, right? The yards per route run, what he was able to deliver, like yards per target. Like, you look at yards per target, Jalen Waddle was top of the league last year, right? That's what Tyreek Hill was in Kansas City. And so you have two of those guys, and you're surprised that this is one of the top offenses in the league? Nonsense, right? So no, you can't lead off with, oh, this is the Mike McDaniel offense. Just like you can't do it with Brian Daboll. And every year I say you can't do it, and then people do it, and then a year later they're like, oh yeah, that's why you really shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, because now we look really bad. But nobody could have ever imagined that Brian Daboll could faceplant from being, the reason why he's the reason why the Giants are so good. And as long as they have Daboll, and Daboll we trust, the rug gets pulled very quickly. Mike McDaniel, the same narrative is going to be eviscerated in the years ahead. Just wait for it. Everyone just wait for it. It's inevitable. It is the football inevitability that Golden Boy Coach X will be exposed. It's just a matter of time. With Daboll, it was 6 months. So I am celebrating. If there's victory lapping. If there is one thing I am victory lapping and celebrating full-throatedly this season, it is the failure and the face planting of Brian Daboll.
I mean, we'll go into a lot of things. So the Giants obviously miss Saquon desperately. They need him for that offense to do just about anything, which is a problem in and of itself. Going to McDaniel, the 7 fastest speeds tracked by Next Gen Stats for ball carriers this year, all of them are Dolphins. The 7 fastest, all are Dolphins. Al Davis would have fucking loved this team.
But a bunch of those must be McDaniel, right? He's that fast. He's the reason, right? Isn't it McDaniel? Isn't he the reason they're so fast?
I think he's probably number 8 on that list somewhere in there.
He's a big part of it, right? Doesn't he play?
Getting some sprints in. But the going back to how quickly things changed, Dynasty wide receiver 1 3 years ago was Michael Thomas. Definitely not now.
Oh,
And
baby.
you look at change, right? The question that you Dynasty teams often ask are the same questions that NFL teams ask, which is basically, what do we look like 3 years from now? If we're right about everything, if we're right about some things and wrong about some things, and if we're wrong about everything, what does our team look like 3 years from now? And the funniest part about it is we talked about this 2 years ago with Atlanta. They didn't know they were rebuilding. And the issue that happens is you can't reset expectations after the season. You've got to start saying the things now. Look, we're not the team that we thought we were. There are wholesale changes coming. We have to try a different approach. It can't just be, oh, we were out toughed today. That doesn't play anymore because fans are getting smart enough to understand you can change things. We saw it with the Bears last year. Why they didn't do that for the first 4 weeks of the season, I have no fucking idea. They found something that worked and then pivoted immediately away from it. And so now you're hearing the same things that we said pre-draft about CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young playing out in real time. And when it comes to the victory up, I'll take the L on Carolina. I thought Bryce would be better than he has been so far. I thought that team would be better than they have been so far. But the biggest question mark that we had for the season when we did our season previews, one of the biggest questions that we raised was, how far can the rookie AFC South quarterbacks take their teams? Because if Anthony Richardson is that guy, the Colts are going to make more noise than people expect. If
That's
CJ
right.
Stroud is the guy,
They already have. They're 3-2. They're
gonna
top of their division.
And so now you're looking at what they've built out, and you're going to start to hear the name. Shout out to PFF legend Bobby Slowick, who is the OC in Houston. You're going to start to hear his name pop up for all kinds of head coaching gigs because he is doing something that historically teams have not done. And what is that? He's allowing CJ Stroud to play quarterback at the NFL level. There are no restraints on him. The entire playbook is open. If he makes mistakes, he makes mistakes, but he hasn't so far. And that's the remarkable thing about what players can become if you let them be actual football players. Right now, Bryce Young's biggest problem in Carolina is that offensive line isn't great. And it's compounded by the fact that he's not a tall, he's not as tall as CJ. He's not the athlete that Anthony Richardson is. So many things had to go right for him to work out the way that he's working out, but it just hasn't happened. And so when you look at guys that are going to take that next head coaching role, everybody wants an offensive coach now. Every fan base is clamoring. You hear it about Chicago. You hear about Denver, before they got Sean Payton. We need an offensive coach. We need an offensive coach. We need an offensive coach. You're going to hear the name Bobby Slowick, Texans OC, start to be thrown into those discussions. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, is going to start to be thrown in those discussions. And a big part of it is because if you allow quarterbacks to play to their strengths, Jared Goff looks like a different player in this year than he did even last year. And he was really good last year. He looks better now than he did even outside of the one Super Bowl year with the Rams.
Why?
It's because of the players around him.
Yes, it's the offensive line specifically.
Yeah. It's
even with Amon-Ra St. Brown not 100% or not playing, Goff is operating efficiently, getting the ball to Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds.
Laporta.
No one thinks that Josh Reynolds is a difference maker. Right? Josh Reynolds is a cardboard cutout starting wide receiver in the league. Whenever you have an injury, right, there's Josh Reynolds to step up and get you 7 to 8 targets. Right? That's what he is. And if you have an offensive line that gives you that extra second is everything. That extra second for that throw window to open up, for that receiver to get separation, whatever it is, that extra second is everything in the NFL. And Daniel Jones is not getting an extra second he was last year, right? Andrew Thomas is not healthy, right? Evan Neal has not stepped up the way we hoped he would. We thought he might. Like, that was the big question. We talked to Dan Fornick, offensive line expert that does the offensive line rankings on PlayerProfiler.com. Check out the player rankings. We've got cornerback rankings. We've got offensive line rankings. In addition to the weekly projections, the full season rankings, and Dynasty rankings, of course, everything. Check it out, playerprofiler.com. The price has been dropped now to $30 for the rest of the season for the player rankings. That was the big looming question was, will Evan Neal step up? Will he take a step forward? And then that if Andrew Thomas is healthy, this is the offensive line that could improve the most. And as it turns out, they've been the offensive line that has improved the least. This is why you cannot invest in quarterbacks that are offensive line dependent. There's a number of quarterbacks around the league that they can only operate in an environment where they're getting that extra second and they'll look good. And then when they're not getting that extra second, they look incompetent. That's been Daniel Jones' entire career. This is not a secret. I can't believe everyone is like, this is surprising. Look at Daniel Jones. What? Have you not been? You saw Jared Goff when he wasn't getting the time to throw. He looked incompetent, right? Now, the Giants, they signed Daniel Jones to a 4-year, $160 million contract. Now, that's not the amount that's guaranteed. There's only $81 million guaranteed, but $81 million guaranteed for Daniel Jones. And the thing about the contract is, this year, the cap hit was only $15+ million. Next year, the cap hit on Daniel Jones is $47 million. And then they can get out the next year and have to eat another $22 million in dead cap. So that is one of the reasons why the Titans are struggling is because they overpaid Ryan Tannehill. They had put together with Taylor Lewin, they put together a top 5 offensive line for a year or two. You saw Derrick Henry running over the NFL and
everybody,
the Jaguars specifically, more than anyone else, right? And it was weird. You have gaping running lanes, right, for Derrick Henry running for 200+ yards, and then you have efficient Ryan Tannehill. You're like, I wonder what is the through line here? What's the common denominator? I wonder, is it Taylor Lewin and company? Yes, right? So that is one of the most difficult things for a front office to resist, is to recognize that this quarterback is a system quarterback. He is operating at a high level because he's getting that extra second. And if you take that second away, this is going to be $40 million flushed down the toilet.
Having an immobile quarterback in 2023. Now, they don't necessarily have to be mobile in the way that a Daniel Jones is mobile or, in the way that a Justin Fields is mobile. But they have to be able to move around a little bit because you watch what happens to even really good offenses when their quarterback becomes a statue. Look at Cincinnati the first couple of weeks of the year when Burrow couldn't move. They look like a completely different team in week 5 now that his mobility is back and he can continue to save them on plays. Can he do something late in the down? This is the difference between Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. The reason that you're watching San Francisco run over everybody is the down isn't dead after 2.5 seconds anymore. He can go get you an extra half second and throw the ball to somebody and do something productive. That's not, hey, Kyle's play didn't work. It's dead. We're in the water now. Now we're in 3rd and 15. All of those things add up over time. And when you look at it contractually, the major question that you have to ask yourself is, if you're the Giants, can you, in order to be a championship level roster, you have to get the value out of the players you paid. If the Giants want to be a championship roster, they need to get $47 million worth of quarterback play out of Daniel Jones or someone else. That's what it takes to be competitive.
This is organizational malfeasance, right? Paying Daniel Jones that amount of money for that amount of time. Now, I get it. Just like Ryan Tannehill, the organization can get out of it. But the problem is, yes, the Titans could have got out of Ryan Tannehill a year ago, but they had no other options. They tried to draft Malik Willis. It didn't work. They tried to draft Will Levis. It didn't work, right? We'll see with Will Levis, but he's trending toward busting, right? So they have to keep him anyway. It's like, yeah, you got an out in a couple years. Yeah, but the fact that he's there precludes you from upgrading the position as aggressively as you would otherwise. Like Carolina, they were the most aggressive in trying to upgrade to the point they traded DJ Moore. They threw in DJ Moore. They overpaid in draft picks, then threw in DJ Moore because they were so desperate to upgrade the position. when you're making the playoffs and you have fortunate bounces of the ball to the extent that you end up with and a soft schedule and close out the season with the best record, you're the number 1 seed in the AFC, you're not going to be focused on upgrading the quarterback position, right? And then you saw the exact same thing happen, right? What happened to the Titans is what happened the year prior is what happened to the Minnesota Vikings last year, where they somehow, some way, were able to win every close game, and they started to think, well, maybe Kirk Cousins is good enough, right? So they deluded themselves time and time again. So many of these teams dilute themselves into thinking, oh, pocket passer X, system quarterback Y is good enough. And now you look at the Giants, you look at the Vikings, they're on the short list of teams that need to start considering tanking. Minnesota is already there. Minnesota has a negative point differential, and they're 1-4.
Yeah.
And now there's no Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's on IR. So now your number 1 receiver is a rookie, and then you have a tight end and TJ Hawkinson. There's still plenty of talent in the receiving game, right? KJ Osborne's very capable. Great.
Like him a lot.
We like him, right? But not Justin Jefferson, right? You're not going to those big plays that put you in scoring position that Justin Jefferson delivers are not available with the current talent they have now in that wide receiver room. And Kirk Cousins is a quarterback that needs protection, and he needs playmakers around him. He needs Jefferson and Thielen. And when you pull those away, he's not going to be able to elevate the team on his own. That's what $40+ million quarterbacks look like, and that's not Kirk Cousins. And so this is why when you go out and you make this move for Kirk Cousins, as the Vikings did, was it 5 years ago?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, I think somewhere in there.
This is the ticket to quarterback purgatory, right? When the Titans, we talked about this, when the Titans acquired Ryan Tannehill, the worst thing that could happen was that they at the same time their offensive line coalesces, and Ryan Tannehill has a career year.
There's
that actually doomed the franchise for another 5 years. Just like the season that the Giants put together last year potentially doomed this franchise for 5 years. And now we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how quickly the Minnesota front office adjusts.
I would assume that Kirk is going to at least attempt to be moved. I don't know if he'll waive his no trade. But the team that I go back to every time we see something like this is the AFC Championship Jags. When Bortles was on his contract year and Leonard Fournette was carving up everybody, and they had Boye and Ramsey, and that defense was crazy. And we know defensive stickiness year to year doesn't really last. And, you've got to find something out of your offense. And, that required a full-scale teardown 2 years later. And then they lucked into Trevor Lawrence because they did everything they could to give him away, and the Jets did everything they could to give him back. So then you have the Urban Meyer fiasco, obviously, and now you hire a coach in Doug Peterson that actually does something, and Trevor Lawrence looks like Trevor Lawrence. If you don't luck into a generational prospect like that, where is your path back?
Because they didn't try to backfill the quarterback position. They lost Bortles, and they went with Nick Foles to lock in that number 1 pick. This is what you have to do. You have to resist. Right? And the problem is these franchises, they want to win, right? And certainly there's a lot of competition among the top equity holders, right? And they're impatient. A lot of these are older men that they want to show their friends that they have a winning team. And so they want to bring in headstrong Coach X, right? And then Houston, they had that in Bill O'Brien. And where'd it get them? Right? Bill O'Brien had a hard ceiling, right? And then so Tennessee, right? Bring in Vrabel. Bringing in Vrabel is not the solution. Vrabel actually holds you back because Vrabel is going to lobby to get Tannehill because he wants to maintain his job. He doesn't want to be the captain of the tanker, right? He doesn't. No one wants to captain the sinking tanker, right? That you're definitely not going to be in the league very long doing that. You're going to be. You have 1 or 2 years left, at most. You know it. The clock is ticking, right? You're just a placeholder coach. You need to be okay with going years with no quarterback and a placeholder coach. You can't be tempted to try to solve the problem with a system quarterback, solve the problem, in quotes, with, you know, one of these headstrong coaches, one of these, you know, or you know, one of these coaches with a championship resume, because that could potentially cost you a first-round pick, right? And now what? Now Denver has Sean Payton, and Sean Payton is going to be lobbying for short-term fixes to save his reputation.
I'm pretty sure the pick that they traded was the one they got for Bradley Chubb too. So you just traded functionally one of the best edge rushers in the league for a head coach that now you also traded three picks for a quarterback. It's also
God. Oh God.
This team would be so good if you could take the 2023 Broncos offense and give them the 2022 Broncos defense, because they've allowed 200 points as of last night.
Yeah,
they've allowed 200 points in 6 games. That's over 33 points a game. That is terrible. That is god awful. It's
a process, man. It's a process. You got to dump Deshaun Watson. You got to dump Bill O'Brien. You know, so they dumped Bill O'Brien. They dumped Deshaun Watson. That was only a couple of years ago, right? I believe Deshaun Watson was a Texan in early 2022.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're only a year and a half out from the start of the rebuild in Houston, right? The real, and then it started before that, but firing Bill O'Brien, and then it expedited. But already we're seeing signs that this team is for real, and they're going to be for real for the next 10 years. Like, this is what you want. You want to build a team that every year you can go out and make those moves that Bill Belichick was making throughout the 2000s, right? Where you can just grind on other teams and acquire picks and make those small tactical moves to bolster the back of your roster, because you know the top of your roster is set. The top of your roster is Laramie Tunsil. The top of your roster is C.J. Stroud, right? And you in particular are being vindicated right now. And we've talked about this all off season, but you in particular were very vocal saying, hey, Ohio State quarterbacks are not what these narratives, these sports narratives are portraying them as. C.J. Stroud is the best, right? And this idea that he's not the information processor that Bryce Young is foolish, right? He's got 4 to 5 inches on Bryce Young. He's much more mobile, and he's Bryce Young's equal, if not a better downfield thrower. There's nothing not to like about C.J. Stroud, and you know the skepticism around Justin Fields is just unwarranted, right? And then now all of a sudden we're looking up, and Justin Fields has 2 consecutive weeks. He's finally found his sea legs, and he looks comfortable, and he's becoming a prolific passer. That was always in him. That was always in his range of capabilities. We saw it at Ohio State. It's the thing that we talked about and have been talking about for the last 2 years is that whatever you were seeing at Ohio State is football. It's not fake football, right? It's not. That wasn't a video game. That was real football. And Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud are real football players. Just because you have an Alabama helmet doesn't make it real, and an Ohio State helmet makes it fake. That's not a thing. As it turns out, both Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud are great assets for their NFL franchises, and it's the mobility and the ability to push the ball down the field to the deeper quadrants that it makes them, separates them from a quarterback like a Daniel Jones or even a Jared Goff.
The thing that made CJ so special was anticipation. You can try to teach it, but there are a lot of quarterbacks that come into the NFL where it's see ball, throw ball. Basically, they flash open, you throw. Go watch what he looks like. And the only player that I've ever seen that's also, was in Columbus at any point in time that had anticipation like that was number 9 in Cincinnati. That's the only other one that I've ever seen like that. Justin got away with it because he's got a freakish arm. So, he can be late. Slash. But he can afford to be late in ways that CJ just can't, but CJ's not late. They, and they just, again, the receiver recruiting is another thing. Do you think those guys want to play with B+ quarterbacks? Because that's not what they're getting right now.
No. CJ... Apparently, actually, it looks like it as it turns out, and this is not something I had on my bingo card, right? But turns out it might be that CJ Stroud made Jackson Smith and Jigba, not the other way around.
Oof, that's a take.
Well, so far.
So far. We'll
far.
go with that.
So far.
The biggest thing that we saw in CJ that was different is, wins and losses ultimately are going to be attributed to a quarterback, fair or unfair. That's just the way that the casual fan sees the game, and most people are not as invested in such things as we are. But what you watched him do or try to do against Michigan and Georgia 3 times in his career was basically put an offensive line and a team on his back and try to carry them on his own. And those were the only times where it looked like he might be something other than what he's showing you he is in Houston right now. He was always that player. And we talked about it pre-draft, where once someone shows you something, it's in there. They can do it. Justin Herbert in the Rose Bowl is the best example of it. We didn't see the mobility there because he didn't have to. And then same thing with CJ against Georgia. We didn't see it until he had to, but he showed you he can do it. And that's helping them adapt to the NFL in ways that, if you have a statue quarterback, you just can't. That's why CJ is succeeding in situations that Davis Mills couldn't, is he's giving himself an extra quarter second at time. He's anticipating a throw a little bit faster because he's had NFL receivers his entire college career. I mean, we know what Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are. We know what Jackson Smith and Jigba profiles as. He had basically NFL lineman his entire Ohio State career. He's basically playing NFL football just down a level. And that's why so often these guys come in from an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Clemson or, any of these major programs, Georgia, and they struggle because the talent is not the same.
I don't remember anyone doubting Trevor Lawrence because he had great weapons at Clemson.
Right? It's a strange narrative, but it is what it is. And, he's showing right now what an Ohio State quarterback can be and what a special player he is, because you're scouting CJ Stroud, not Ohio State quarterback that wears number 7. If you're scouting Ohio State,
it's a big win. Last few weeks have been a big win for Ohio State quarterbacks in general. Yeah. And this idea and vanquishing the idea that Ohio State's a fake program and that the quarterback play there is fake. It's not. It's real. It's real. That's that. It turns out that football players making football plays is real, and coaches getting the credit for the football plays, like Brian Daboll, is fake. That's fake sports analysis where just, hey, player X is doing really well. He's good. See, that's real in it. That's real. See, that's real. Now, you and I need to talk about our predictions for who's going to come out of the AFC, who's going to come out of the NFC. I think we have enough sample now. We can start to make some predictions, and we will get into it after this. Brought to you by Mojo. Mojo is that player stock market. We love Mojo because we like making lifetime bets on players. You run out the clock on these guys. Mojo just rolled out a brand new fantasy platform. That's right. So now you can build a portfolio of player props. Oh, Jamar Chase, over 77.5. Oh, Kadarius Toney, under 15.5, whatever the under is on Kadarius Toney, doesn't matter. You can just stack up the props in your portfolio. And the beauty is, once the Sunday games kick off, it's not over. It's not over until it's over with Mojo, because once those games kick off, you can then move in and out of positions. Let's say that you're well ahead of expectations. You can cash out. Let's say you're behind expectations. You're underwater. Well, you can double down. That's what makes Mojo so special, why they're different. Check it out. Go to the App Store, get the Mojo app, and use the promo code UNDERWORLD. The promo code UNDERWORLD gets you a 100% deposit match up to $100. So the promo code is UNDERWORLD, and they will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Go to Mojo, start building your portfolio, and then during the games, you can be a fantasy day trader. Woo. The Bengals, not dead yet.
Not dead yet.
Not dead yet. Not dead yet. What are the chances? The chances the Bengals can come out of the AFC?
I think the biggest question that you have is, how long will it take Joe to get back to 100%? Because he's playing at probably 80, 85% right now. So you hope that, by week 8, week 9, he can carry the load the way that he has before. T. Higgins obviously going out is a big deal because it now allows people to bracket Chase in a way that they weren't able to before.
Really? They're going to let Trenton Irwin beat him? That's the problem? That is a problem,
Charlie
by
Football.
The way. That is a problem.
Charlie Football. Don't forget about him.
I want to see Charlie Football out there.
And then, they're playing in a division where everyone's either 3-2 or 2-3 right now. If the playoffs started tomorrow,
they've got the most overrated top of the division team in the sport. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a minus 31 point differential and have a winning record. I love that Pittsburgh is being competitive because I like Kenny Pickett and I like this offense. I think this offense was underrated. Again, overinvested in it in the offseason. It really, the only player that's truly working out is George Pickens. But Pittsburgh is not going to make the playoffs. Spoiler alert for everybody. And the two teams with positive point differentials are Baltimore and Cleveland. Cincinnati, negative 31. The issue I see with Cincinnati is their schedule is so brutal because they're the division winner last year, that they play all these other division winners, that they play the Chiefs, they play the Bills. It's just so tough. It's so tough. But if Pittsburgh and Cleveland can just, if everyone in the division can beat each other up enough, they just need to make it through. If the Bengals can find a way to win this division, then they become dangerous in the playoffs. They become a real threat. But everyone else, Buffalo, Kansas City, they need to be rooting for Cincinnati to not make it in.
Yeah, they're probably, if you're Buffalo, if you're KC, the team you want winning the North is Cleveland, because as great as that defense is, and they have been fantastic, borderline historically great early, you're trusting your quarterback to find the plays to win a game against Cleveland, opposed to having, Burrow, Chase, Higgins in Cincinnati that can drop 30 on just about anyone. So, I'm with you. I think Baltimore.
Well, they've played one less game, right? Yeah. Cleveland's only played 4 games, but they've allowed fewer points than the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah. It's impressive effort, man. They're, Cleveland sits 9th in DVOA, which is a stat that we obviously care about. Baltimore 7th, and Baltimore's right next to KC, sitting at 6th. So,
it's brutal. It's such a tall order for the Bengals to actually just make the playoffs. But if they do get healthy at the right time, we've seen this happen where the team comes in as the 6th seed and then they make a run. Can they make it all the way, though? Can they make it past Buffalo? Can they make it past Miami? Can they make it past Kansas City? That is the question.
The team that if you're Cincinnati, has to scare you the most of those is Miami, because it's the only one that they haven't had to deal with yet. I mean, they've gone into KC and won. They've gone into Buffalo and won. They've done that before. I'm not saying that's extremely likely that they do it again, but they've done it before. They've shown that they can do it. Miami presents a different challenge simply because Tyreek, Jalen, Mostert, A-Chain, one of them gets loose. Suddenly now you're chasing points, and you don't want to be chasing points against Miami because they can run you to death. And I mean, everybody keeps talking about Tua in this past game and how exciting that portion of the team is. But lost in that is Mostert and A-Chain are just churning out 80-yard runs every single week. And that's the part of it that kills you, is when they're supposed to get 5 and they get 80 and they do that 2 or 3 times a game, now you're chasing points immediately and you're in a really bad spot. We saw Denver have that happen.
Robert Hunt. On this show, we always make sure that we call out the offensive linemen who are the real reasons. It's not okay. Just Robert Hunt matters more to the Dolphins than Mike McDaniel. Okay, that sounds like a hot take. I can guarantee you, if you ask anyone that's actually on the Dolphins roster, that's like the most obvious thing they've ever heard. But to a football fan, they're like, that can't possibly be true. No. You want to know what? Yes, that's that. The early second rounder, big, thick guard with athleticism, but also when you hear the analysis, the nasty factor, right? That's what you want. You want a guy that is big and quick and nasty. And that's the guy that can unlock the running game. That one guy can absolutely unlock the running game. That's the name that you need to know. And
there are several others. But when we talk about,
I'm just saying that when that draft pick came in, and I heard that, and they want these guys that just they want it. They eat dirt. The most famous guy like this that I remember John Madden adored. His name was Larry Allen. He was a road grading guard for the Cowboys, and John Madden would always make a note that whenever there would be a big run or a touchdown run by Emmitt Smith, that he would call out Larry Allen, right? And don't forget, Larry Allen's the real reason why this is going on, right? So that and what did Larry Allen have? What the nasty factor. Right, that's the thing with these guys. They just want to get in. They want to get dirty. They don't want to wear deodorant. Right, they don't want to shower. They just want to be the slimiest, scummiest motherfucker. Right, that's what they celebrate. I've been around these offensive linemen, man. When they get together as a unit, right, they fucking celebrate getting dirty, getting nasty, and when they come together and all 5 of them have that mentality, look out. Look out. When they coalesce and they don't give a fuck and they will spit in your face, that is the ultimate nightmare for a defense, and that's the type of offensive line you want to run behind if you're a running back. And I guess the best example of that, when you just look at a total unit, would be the Denver Broncos in the 90s, right? Terrell Davis was not a high draft pick. Terrell Davis wasn't particularly explosive, right? And then if Terrell Davis goes down, then it's Orlandis Gary. Then Orlandis Gary goes down, it's Mike Anderson. And it doesn't matter. You're talking about 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns for that running back every time. Why? Because those offensive linemen didn't shower and they will spit in your face. And that's what you love. And that's what's happening, man. And Robert Hunt was part of that culture, bringing him into Miami, and that's what's happening.
There are 3 that kind of come to mind from that also, and ties into this season easily. One of them is Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma when he came to Kansas City. That
There's
one
another
changed immediately. Changed immediately.
Everything changed with Creed Humphrey.
The Bears look better recently on offense. They got a guy named Tevin Jenkins back. He's pretty important.
This is another player that Dan Fornick talked about. He said this could be the most improved offensive line. We're talking about potentially most improved offensive lines. We threw out the Giants and the Bears as potential options. Giants didn't fire. Bears are firing. Tevin
The
Jenkins
other
is a big
one,
part of that. Tevin Jenkins is a motherfucker.
the other part of this, as a Rams fan, Steve Avila out of TCU. Kyron Williams looks like Kyron Williams because they fixed the offensive line, not because Kyron Williams is unbelievable.
They had so few picks. We talked about this in Kansas City at the draft. They have so few picks. And if you're going to have so few picks, what's the one place you cannot make a mistake, right? If you're going to have just a couple picks in the first, the top 100, if you just have a couple picks in the top 100 over a 5-year span, what must you do with that pick? The 5th pick in the second round, right? The 37th overall pick. You go 330-pound guard from TCU, right? Or a tackle, whatever. He can play any position, right? I don't know. Where is he playing right now? I don't remember. They projected him as a guard in the league, but I think that he could play tackle if he needed him to.
Yeah, he's played guard so far.
Right. So he's playing guard. This is what you want.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
this is exactly what you want. His all-time class rank, right? In terms of in the draft class, okay. He was number 50 out of 320 athletes. Just looking at athleticism, because we size adjust. You're like, oh, he runs a 4, or he runs a 5.21. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a 72nd percentile speed score for a guard, right? If you're 330 pounds and you run a 5.21, you're moving. That's how you get a top 50 athleticism score as a guard. And then what are the people that were scouting the position? What are they telling you? Steve Avila, nasty. Steve Avila doesn't care, right? He doesn't care. This is not a person like I would want to be married to. Right? You don't want to be married to these people, right? They don't care. They are not. The hygiene. None of that matters, right? They want to break their own nose and spit blood in your face. That's what you want. And yeah, that was such a great pick because they could have taken chances, right? You could take more of a developmental edge rusher there. We talked about this in Kansas City, but the reason why the Avila pick was so smart is that's the one you're locking in, and that might be the exact same draft spot as Robert Hunt.
We when we were in Kansas City, I was having the post bourbon discussion with Alex Dunlap that we have the round table every year after round 1, where we sit down and kind of look at who's available, and the Rams had that pick. And what we were discussing at the time is Will Levis wasn't off the board yet. So Alex and I were having the discussion, what do the Rams do? Because we know Stafford is kind of in his last couple years. There's not really a backup plan yet. Stetson Bennett hadn't been drafted. Nothing had been done yet. So Alex was basically asking me, if you have this pick, who would you take? And I was like, dude, it's your guy. He's from TCU. I would take Steve Avila. We were talking about this, the night before round 2 and 3. And the fact that they did it kind of honestly surprised me a little bit. And I was honestly surprised that he was there because
that's the thing though. They did the thing. They didn't go with the flashy, we're going to fix the franchise overnight pick. They did, this guy's great value and we have so few picks. We can't make a mistake here. We have to have the highest floor pick. He was the highest floor pick on the board.
Oh, for sure. And I think they knocked that one out of the park. And it's, you're watching it pay dividends now. And, everybody's enamored with Puka Nacua and the start that he's had, which justified. He's been awesome. Cooper Kupp's coming back. The offense looks really good. But so much of that is the fact that Matthew Stafford has time because he's a completely different quarterback. And I mean, he's playing out of his mind right now. I know that, if you look at the raw numbers, it doesn't quite show just how impressive he's been. But a lot of this goes back to, if you don't trust your offensive line as a quarterback, you're remarkably limited in what you can get done. We saw it happen to Pat in the Super Bowl when they played Tampa Bay, when he was down offensive linemen. And, it can happen to even the best of them. So as we've advocated for years, the best thing you can do if you don't know what to do with an early day 2 draft pick is draft the nastiest interior offensive or defensive lineman you can find.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a fun victory lap for us in that in the offseason, I always feel like we're being repetitive and we're like, hey, we're so predictable, right? We're like, well, actually right there, you probably just want to take the nastiest motherfucker at guard. That is the chalk move and what should be viewed as a chalk move, but so many teams will overthink it. So we talked about that, and to see this, and to see guys like Steve Avila and players like Robert Hunt being the reason, the unlock, and yet, like, we know it, and there's no articles being written about them. You go the whole broadcast, and sometimes they barely get mentioned, and it's like, yeah, but so we're seeing a different game here, everybody. Like, and we're playing a different thing. It's like, all the post draft analysis or leading into day 2, like who's on the board, right? We're sitting there going, but Steve Avila, like that's what we get excited about. Whereas others are like, well, what about Hendon Hooker? What about Will Levis? And it's like, oh, come on, man, get out of here. Like to me, it was like Anthony Richardson's off the board, CJ Stroud's off the board, don't care. Right. I'm on to the positions that'll actually help you win. Right. And
I mean, we've seen
guys. I think that guard position, especially to a team that doesn't have strong interior linemen, if you don't have a guard that is above average, getting one needs to be a top priority for a front office. Right? You think about the Raiders, right? Think of the Raiders. They could have had Avila, right? He went a pick later. They instead went tight end. Tight end is just not as valuable of a position. It was a very deep position. They could have had a tight end in a round later. There's plenty available, right, in that draft. A lot of size, speed specimens at tight end. You didn't need to reach for Michael Mayer there when you had the draft was giving you building block assets that are going to make the difference in wins and losses, and Michael Mayer's not making a damn bit of difference. So, but when we're looking at the AFC, I don't think the Bengals really have a chance. I think that even the Dolphins, I think they're a long shot because you have teams that are putting up historic seasons. When you look at historic DVOA, aren't the Bills one of the best we've seen? And you could argue they're so far having just as good a season as they did last year, where at this point last year it was assumed the Bills were going to roll into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Niners and the Bills so far have 2 of the top 20 DVOA seasons through 6 games or through 5 games ever.
Ever? Oh. Ooh.
Yeah. So you're not talking about 2 really hot starts. You're talking about 2 historic starts. And as we've seen before, sometimes they ride this all the way out. Sometimes injuries catch up to you. Again, you want to peak at the right time. We've said all these things. But that being said, you're watching 2 teams in the Niners and the Bills firing on all cylinders, and it's pretty to watch, man. They're wrecking people. I know the Bills have 2 losses. We don't care. That eventually that'll even out. I'm not remotely worried about Buffalo. I know Bills fans are like, the sky is falling. What's going on here? How do we lose to Jacksonville? Jacksonville's, newsflash, everybody, Jacksonville's actually good.
Well, when Jacksonville was bad, they beat the Bills 9-6 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
the Bills were great. Jacksonville was bad. Jacksonville is a bad matchup for the Bills. I wouldn't worry about that at all. Also, Kansas City's 5-1, and they have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. So those are the 2 teams, right? I don't think that the Bengals are going to be able to surpass those 2 teams. I think that's going to be the AFC Championship. I think and I think that sadly the Dolphins are going to run out of steam. But by the time we get to deep into the playoffs, they're eventually teams that make the playoffs for the first time, make a run for the first time. They typically can get close to that conference championship game and miss. And then it's really the next year. If you're a Dolphins fan, you really should be focused on 2024. That's the year, because I don't think you can get past both Mahomes and the Bills this year. So don't worry about it. Like, your teams looks great, right? You got Robert Hunt. You're awesome. Just focus on how good things are getting. Don't get too fired over your skis this year with expectations. In the NFC, it seems very clear to me that it's going to be Eagles 49ers. I'm much more certain it's going to be Eagles 49ers than I am that it's going to be Chiefs Bills. That's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Chiefs Bills, Eagles 49ers. Do you think that's true, or do you have someone else in mind, either the AFC or the NFC, for the conference championship games?
So I think Bills Chiefs is the grouping that most likely is going to be your AFC championship game. But you have teams like Cincinnati that, have proven that they can do it. You have a team like Miami that can score with anybody on any given day. So they're obviously threatening. But I think, too, they're being overlooked right now. I wouldn't overlook Jacksonville because, the addition of Ridley, once they really work him in and he's comfortable there. And then everybody every year, because their health falls apart, everybody forgets about Baltimore. That is a tough fucking out. You do not want to see Baltimore in January. That is a really tough team. As famously,
I can see it. That's the team I can see. If there was a team that's gonna, I actually think that Baltimore, the way they're constructed and the way playoff football works, they're more likely to spoil that Bills-Chiefs matchup than the Dolphins are.
The scariest part about Baltimore is Lamar looks like MVP Lamar 2.0. Oh, yeah. And if he gets even a semblance of help, I mean, they're just, you know what you're going to get from them year in, year out if they're healthy. And even when they're not healthy, it took Sam Hubbard creating a miracle for Cincinnati to win a home wild card game against them last year. Like, we don't have to rewrite history to sit here and understand that that's a really, really, really good football team in Baltimore. I think that's one that I'd look out for. Obviously the Bengals, if they get healthy, and then, the Jags. But if you go to the NFC side, the third best team in the league in DVOA, Matt, you know who it is?
Oh God, tell me it's the Cowboys.
It's the Detroit Lions.
Oh, whoa, yes, our Lions, man.
The Detroit Lions, who actually
just imagine if they hadn't drafted a running back in the first round or a middle linebacker in the first round.
A running back they don't use either.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't matter if they use him or not. It was a terrible pick, awful pick, a truly atrocious, embarrassing pick. Let's just pull up the draft board. Right, we could pull up the draft board right away. We could actually let's pull this up on PlayerProfiler.com. We'll pull up the draft board quickly here.
We love the Lions. That's what it looks like when you have, and we talk about all the time, people having culture buy-ins. That's culture buy-in, man. They love Dan Campbell. I do too.
So here's the draft from last year. Okay. And I know this is not right. We have two picks that were flipped: Jalen Carter, Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright, by the way, playing great. Right, we still need to fix that. We're working on it. So anyway, after that, Detroit, through three trades, this pick is traded 3 times, 4 times, finally makes it to Detroit, and they go Jahmyr Gibbs. They could have had another edge rusher next to Aiden Hutchinson. They could have paired Aiden Hutchinson with Lucas Van Ness. They could have bolstered the offensive line with Broderick Jones. That would have probably not helped them this year. He's more of a developmental player. But Will McDonald was there as well, and Christian Gonzalez.
Gonzalez is the one.
I think that in hindsight, and just based on the mocks of all these players, the player that was going the highest in the mocks, it was a clear top 10 talent, was Christian Gonzalez.
I have no idea how he made it to 17.
It doesn't make sense.
To this day, I don't understand it. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why it happened. I don't know who was involved in making that happen. But the most shocking thing when we were in the draft room was Washington taking Emmanuel Forbes before him. You drafted the same position, just the wrong guy.
Oh no, that was horrific. Well,
Yeah.
the Washington Commanders, they're maybe entering a prolonged period of quarterback purgatory with Sam Howell. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that. But
Fun player, though.
So if Detroit at 12 should have gone Christian Gonzalez 100%, and then at 18, in hindsight, okay. Now at the time I would have said Jackson Smith and Jigba, but in hindsight, Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I mean
Zay Flowers. Can you imagine? Just receiver in general. They needed another receiver, right? When you're posting up Josh Reynolds as your alpha, just because they have one injury, and they knew they had to self-scout and know that Jamison Williams was a bust. So you need to go right back to the position. You should have gone right back to the position, and I would have said Jackson Smith and Jigba at the time. Now, with hindsight, Zay Flowers.
I mean, either of them. They
could have totally transformed their perimeter playmaking with Christian Gonzalez and Zay Flowers. Imagine that team with those two players. Oh, baby.
There's a clear second tier in the NFC in a way that the AFC is kind of muddy. And it's Detroit and I think it's Seattle. So I think if somebody spoils the Eagles-Niners championship game, it's going to be one of those two or maybe both of those two. But they're playing really well. New Orleans.
No, get out of here. I have one question to take it home. One final question for you. So the team you didn't mention, okay, to potentially spoil our Eagles 49ers NFC Championship game. For the record, could that team be the Dallas Cowboys?
I don't think so.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.